Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Dune by Frank Herbert. So as usual, we're going to talk non-spoilery thoughts and opinions up front and then move over to the spoiler section where we can talk in more detail about stuff I liked and stuff I didn't like. So with that being said, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So, Dune is really a coming of age story about a young man, Paul Atreides, who is a ducal heir. He will inherit everything from his father. At the beginning of the story, they are granted stewardship over the planet Arrakis, also known as Dune, and it is the only place in the universe where the MacGuffin of the universe can be mined, and that is the spice melange. So, they are tasked basically with being stewards of the planet and dealing with all the production of spice and everything like that. So the story really begins with Paul getting ready to go with his family and move to a new home and a new location and everything. But similar to Game of Thrones and pretty much any other kind of situation like that, there are other houses, there are other great houses, and they have issues with the House of Atreides, and they are basically lifelong, generation long rivals against the house. So the whole time while they're trying to get to Dune and just settle in and deal with life and everything, there's an entire situation going on that's the other houses trying to take stabs at them and all this stuff basically. So it's very, I don't like to continuously make that reference, but it's a very applicable reference, especially because pop culture currently. But it is honestly quite a lot like Game of Thrones, especially the scheming and plans and backstabbing and stuff. When they get to the planet, some of the schemes come to fruition and stuff like that. And Paul finds himself among the natives of the planet and basically has to deal with all of that kind of thing. So that's very much the very skinny, spoiler-free kind of plot throughout of the story. But there's so much more to it. Really the meat and bones, the gold of Dune is the ideas and the themes that Frank Herbert put into the story. So the story itself is pretty much surface level, and even reading it, and I listened to the audiobook, so even going through the audiobook was tough because the pacing is clunky. Some of the characters aren't very well developed. Actions sometimes are like dumber than they need to be. Like some of the characters are like they're not dumb because they're very clearly shown to be smarter people, but they do things that are dumb that just kind of happen because the plot needs it to happen in a way, because Frank kind of needed to just happen in that way, I guess. And the writing style is a little hard to get into. The omniscient kind of third person narrator thing they got going is also cut up with a actual character narrator, so it's kind of weird. So to me, I kind of took it in stride. I kind of took it as it's because it's an old sci-fi book, so the writing style is of course going to be kind of weird. So I kind of took it as that, but I can understand why some people would be very much put off by it. And I also have like major bias because I saw the David Lynch movie when I was young, because I've always been into sci-fi ever since watching Star Trek reruns with my dad, and so I just kind of already had a bent towards it. So I like that movie, even though watching it as a kid, it was like very grotesque, some of the imagery and stuff in the movie. It kind of became a thing that I was always into, and later on when I rediscovered it on like HBO Max, I really was into it because I heard about the new movie, and then I ended up on YouTube and I found a YouTube channel. I think Quinn's Ideas, I think it's called, and he just kind of knows everything about Dune. It seems like he has so many videos about it, and I ran across one of the videos where he just kind of goes through a very high level explanation of everything that happens in the series, and I love lore and I love world building, so I was just so into that, and just all the themes and stuff that are presented in the story got me back around to actually, well, listening to, but reading the book. So I wanted to understand the source of it and see, because I've heard off and on like the David Lynch movie is really a terrible adaptation, but it's also like a kind of a decent adaptation and stuff. So I kind of wanted to, make that assessment for myself. And after finishing the book, I can say it's probably the best adaptation we could have got at the time. Like, because yeah, just the fact that it was even as closely accurate as it was is pretty amazing. Even though it takes the entire theme and purpose of the story and kind of does the opposite. So But that's, to me, that's typical with most adaptations. That kind of happens, especially with something this existential. But that's a good and a bad, because the best parts of Dune is all that high minded, like get you thinking kind of stuff, thinking about ecology and sociology and just the ramifications of power structures and the corruption of that kind of power and the people that would be using that powers for their own ends. Because there is a group of women named the Bene Gesserit who have basically been seeding. They've been basically a shadow government running the entire like government society for years and years and years, and they like control stuff by like their superhuman abilities they have through selective breeding, and it's a whole thing, and it's kind of one of the main things that kind of lead to the whole situation in the book. But I'm trying to keep this very spoiler free, so I'm just going to be very vague about that. But I do recommend it because not only is it some good, just good sci-fi stuff, and it's just some good classic, just nom 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 sci-fi stuff, but it's also just the source of a lot of stuff that we all already know based on pop culture. Like Star Wars took so much from Dune, and so many other different sci-fi and fantasy creations, books and stories and things that have come since then have definitely been inspired by this. So it's kind of one of those linchpin things that you almost kind of have to read if you're a fan of the genre. So just to get the experience of it. But apart from that, I also really wanted to get into it because the new movie's coming out and I want to be able to see see how well of an adaptation it is, along with being able to, retroactively compare the old one and, all that. But I also wanted the true source of this lore and the storytelling and the world building that I found so interesting before, because a lot of the things that was set up in that original movie really piqued my interest, and I really wanted to know like the source of it. And then when basically, I'm kind of repeating myself now, but when I found out there was more lore to pick through because of that YouTube video, I definitely wanted to get into it. So now I got to get through the rest of the books so I can know all the lore, so I can ramble about it a whole lot more. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the non-spoiler section here, but let me just wrap up by saying that the story itself is solid. It is not very, it's not mind-blowing. It's not some, story that you've never seen before, because most things have copied this. So it is very familiar. The writing style is very old and kind of dense, and it might be a turnoff for some people because the pacing is slow. Some of the actions are clunky. The consistent, I'm going to just call it a voiceover because it's just extra narration that feels like the character's voiceover. That is just, it's weird. I'm more or less used to that because of the movie, but your mileage may vary. Um, and there's a lot in it that might feel unnecessary. There's just like basically outtakes that are just statements of context that could be left out. Like, so again, your mileage may vary. You may be into it, you may not. I was kind of into it because I approached this entire story almost as a research project, almost as just world building research, quite literally. Like, so I'm into it for the themes, the ideas, and the world building, not so much the basic story of the single book. So that's why it's hard for me to give it a proper description or a proper recommendation to say if you like it, because it all depends on the angle you're coming at it from. So let's jump over to spoilers so I can try to make that make a little bit more sense. So yeah, spoilers for Dune by Frank Herbert. The main story really is just the story of a young man who is a part of a family that has a rivalry with this other family. And the other family, one of their plans actually works, or kind of half works, and results in the death of his father and causes him and his mother to have to basically flee from where they were. And as a result, they basically get taken in by the natives of the planet Dune, and they become, Fremen. They become, one of the people and all that stuff. But from there, it kind of shifts a little bit. It becomes obvious that Paul is the prophesied figure, the Quasar's Hatteract on this planet and stuff. He is the person that can see past, present, and future of both the male and female line, which means he can just see everything. He just more or less knows everything, and as long as he, don't change probability too much, he can just, go through everything. But even beyond that, the main themes and through lines that are up under everything is the fact that we should be cautious of this idea of a prophesized person or a messiah character, because while on the surface, like, because Paul is our protagonist and like we're kind of coming at it from his perspective, and he is generally a pretty decent person. Like we kind of see it as a good thing. Like it's, you know, what could be so bad about it? Like, because he's just showing himself to be a fairly stand-up person. But the future that he actually sees when he does take up the full mantle is one of just basically death and destruction across the galaxy. And he knows that, like, well, if I keep doing this and I go in this direction, it's going to result in the death of countless people. But if I don't do it, then I could potentially die. And it's like he's almost rocking a hard place kind of situation. So he basically, based on what I know about the series, I know he continues to go down that line and has insane ramifications for the universe, for everything going forward. And they're not all good. Like, it's like what the Bene Gesserit did in creating the prophecy in order to be able to genetically guide a line down in order to be able to actually create this person was not a great thing. Like, they probably saw it as benevolent or just was like a power thing, because their motivations aren't, you know, 100% clear, or their original motivations at that. So there's just so much to it. There's warnings of power structures and people who hold power. There's warnings of characters or figures that are seen as like the one that's going to come and save everyone, like that one person and all that, because ironically, ironically, it's something I think I just realized is that the Fremen are very much about together. Like, we work together, like together we succeed and all this stuff. But Paul comes in and basically puts himself above everyone and says, you are my army, basically, and makes it about him. And that's the jihad and everything that comes later is all about him. So that's another thing that I think Frank Herbert put in here, like, very explicitly on purpose, because we are better together. But when you make it about one person, you can get things like a freaking galactic jihad or something like that. So it's really, really amazing. And I think the story, I think it's so deep and it's just so cerebral, and it just makes me think on level after level after level. And I just really, really like it. So yeah. And one other thing that I just thought was kind of quirky fun was his little sister. She's like preborn. She's born with like all the knowledge of all the reverend mothers of the past and stuff like that. But she's also just like a little 2-year-old, just like a cute little kid. But she like knows way too much. So it's just really cool. It reminds me of like little psychic kids, or like from the Village of the Damned, little kids with the glowing eyes and stuff. Like, I really did kind of that stuff. It's, I don't know, that's the horror fan in me. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up and say, once again, I definitely recommend the story for, if nothing else, as a sci-fi fan, as a fantasy fan. Like, I recommend it at least on that level, so you can see where a lot of this stuff that has impacted and influenced our lives actually came from. So it's really good on that level. And in the future, I'm definitely going to drop some more videos about Dune, not just the sequels, like, because I definitely want to read and review those. But I want to do a video, specifically one that I have in mind right now is about melange, the spice melange, and how that's basically the ultimate MacGuffin I think I've ever seen. So there's a video definitely going to come up talking about that. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that. So have you all read Dune? Let me know what your favorite part was in the comments down below. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I will talk to you all next time. Peace.